Hello everyone, my name is JJirawuthiworavong, and the topic I chose to focus on was Thai dam development on the Mekong River. More specifically, to what extent Thailand should continue or discontinue these projects in regards to the economical, political, and geographical lenses. I was inspired by our stimulus material, Vanishing Voices, and the way it examined specific ethnic minorities and the impacts of globalization within each one. As someone who comes from a Thai background, I was curious to see how the spirit of globalization had taken effect in my country of origin. Similar to the minorities found in Vanishing Voices, Thailand's main prerogative has been to integrate with advanced society, more specifically through achieving an economic prestige in the global market similar to that of the US and China. But instead of an erosion of culture, Thailand has suffered more from trying too hard to sell themselves to others. Appropriately, the two main industries that Thailand is the most invested in are tourism and rapid industrialization. Their methods of industrialization have materialized into what a Berkeley student's thesis refers to as large-scale infrastructure projects, or in layman's terms, plans to build facilities like plants and hydropower dams, which are one of the most popular ventures. So what exactly is hydropower dam? Well, it's pretty self-explanatory. It's the process of using dams to create hydropower, which is defined as power derived from the energy of falling water or fast-running water, which may be harnessed for useful purposes like irrigation and electricity. However, these dams have proved to be more of a burden than a salvation for Thailand, which brings me to my argument. Thailand should suppress their urges to continue their hydropower damming of the Mekong for economical, political, and geographical reasons. So in the interest of time, I'm just going to quickly gloss over this slide. So basically, all you need to know is that this is Thailand's last attempt at creating a hydropower dam. It's called the Pak Moon. And as you can see, it was considered a failure because it was 68% over the budget in nominal terms, which is basically another way to say a fixed estimate without accounting for things like taxes and wages and other adjustable factors. And this was all simultaneously while it was only producing 15% of the estimated electricity it was looking for. So these numbers don't exactly inspire confidence, especially in the hands of a government hell-bent on rapid industrialization and will potentially and probably will create future developments in the future. And it also equally affected rural economies. It was linked so studies found that the Pak Moon was responsible for the regional extinction of over 160 species of fish, which led to many of these Thai Mekong regions not being able to sustain as many local fisheries. And the reason why the ability for these regions to sustain multiple fisheries is important is because most of the fishermen and their families lack the education or skills to get into any different types of work. So as a result, many of these families lost their main source of livelihood and were no longer able to pay for housing and food. This resulted in a lot of anti-dam protests. While some people may claim that the Pak Moon was just an aberration in its failure and that there is still a possibility of successful dams on the Mekong, the potential economic downfalls of a future dam development becomes all that much more avoidable when political baggage is also taken into consideration. So last October there was an NPR article that talked about the effects that talks about the dynamic China has with the local residents of the Mekong, especially in this passage. I'll read it to you. About every month, a few Chinese gunboats cruise down the Mekong River through Myanmar and Laos from China's Guanlei port. Thai patrol boats sit bobbing gently watching. The Chinese gunboat presence is just to remind neighbors of the influence they can wield. So basically, as you can infer, China's been using fear tactics and intimidation to just as a means to flex their monopoly on power over the region. And Thailand has done nothing to help. No doubt that Thailand's spirit of rapid industrialization and appraisal of China as a valuable business partner with dams has helped to fuel China's superiority complex. And it doesn't seem to be getting better either, as the quote later explains. The sharp power that China holds is increasing, and that the author doesn't see that ending anytime soon, meaning that potentially even more restrictive policies could be in line for these local residents. Remember this photo of the Mekong I showed you in the beginning? Well, this is what happens to regions that are subjected to the this is an example of the geographical damage that these dams can cause. Granted, this example is not from a Thai dam, but rather the flooding of a Laotian one, but my sentiment stays the same. The geographical damage caused on the Mekong by the hydropower dams are yet another nail in the coffin for the dangers of hydropower dams. Sorry. Dams have also blocked the flow of sediments and the nutrients they carry into regions, turning regions rich with crop like this one into barren and patchy areas incapable of sustaining life, incapable of sustaining crop life. There's also the added possibility that the dam's giant reservoirs flood over and destroy the adjacent housing and wildlife on the river, like I showed you in the background picture. Add these implications to the fact that this river serves as the main beneficiary of livelihood and food to over 60 million people, and that most of these people are the poorest in the world, and you can see why preserving the Mekong economy or preserving the Mekong geography is such an essential thing. So, to move on to the solutions, the main way that Thailand can make amends is by canceling the Xayaburi Dam, which is their latest project. They started working on this project in March of 2012 and only halted a couple of months later due to internal backlash, but the plans are still in the background of a revival. So what this would do is, by canceling it, this would undoubtedly be a great weight off the shoulders of the protesters, because they've had to, they had to protest for their livelihoods. And potentially this could be worse than the Pakman because it's expected to be larger and even pricier. There's also the added effect that the Mekong is potentially not ready for another dam, as official environmental reports have found that the Mekong, or have suggested that the Mekong should only take in another dam by 2020, and the implications of implementing a dam too early is unknown. But it's too altruistic to assume that Thailand would just turn over this new leaf on their own accord, which is why I think spreading awareness of the issue like I'm doing now would be the best way for people like us to help. So we learned in history class that one of the main reasons why apartheid ended was because of the international action taken against South Africa, like the boycotting of South African goods. Well, not to give them too much credit, but one of the main reasons why that international condemnation was able to come into fruition was because of smaller groups of individuals making a call to action, like someone to we'll leave them with our specific causes in our capstone projects. So the point I'm trying to get to here is that a growing international sentiment of anti-dams against Thailand is likely to work because they are so invested in wanting to improve their global status. However, that condemnation will only come as a result of people like us making a call to action and pointing out the injustices that are happening. Thank you for listening.
Justin, what information did you need before you began your research, and how did that information shape your research?
Well, like I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, my main goal was to do a project involving Thailand, and just looking through the stimulus packet and looking at the different themes, I thought that the globalization theme and the impacts of globalization theme would work the best for implementing that into the topic of Thailand. So that's probably, and then just looking at globalization in Thailand, I was able to easily find out the huge dilemma with hydropower dams.
And secondly, how does your conclusion respond to any of the research or sources that you've examined?
Well, canceling the Zaya-Buri, my first solution, would be a response to pretty much like one source that I found that concerned the well, I guess overall it would just be a solution to pretty much my sources, because most of my sources took on the idea of, you know, the idea that dams are bad and pointing out the reasons why they have caused so much trouble. And so by coming up with a solution that they should cancel the latest dam project was pretty indicative of what most of these environmentalists would follow as well.
Thank you.